Recently, Diane Keaton, the legendary actress who won an Academy Award for Annie Hall, passed away at the age of 79. Her sudden departure left millions of fans around the world in deep sorrow. Few people know that just a few months before her death, Diane Keaton had unexpectedly put up for sale her Brentwood mansion, the very place where she had lived, worked, and lovingly called the home of my life. It was there, surrounded by red brick walls and California sunlight, that she wrote books, took photographs, created art, and found the rare tranquility she could never quite grasp under Hollywood's glaring lights. That is why, when news of the sale was made public, both the media and her fans were stunned, for Diane Keaton had once vowed she would live in that house for the rest of her life. Because of that, many believed the decision carried an eerie sense of forewarning, as if she had been quietly preparing for her own departure. Some even whispered that within those very walls, there had been nights when things happened that no one dared to speak of, not even those who had witnessed them. So what really happened inside that house that made her want to leave? And could it in some way be connected to her death? Diane Keaton was born on January 5, 1946, in Los Angeles, California, into a middle-class family. Her father, John Keaton, was an engineer and real estate broker, a principled, pragmatic man with a somewhat reserved nature. Her mother, Dorothy Diane Keaton, on the other hand, was a creative spirit who had once been crowned Mrs. Los Angeles in 1955 and was the first to instill in Diane a love for art photography and architecture passions that would later become the cornerstones of her life. Los Angeles in the 1950s was the symbol of the American dream, warm sunshine convertibles, and prosperous suburbs. Yet to young Diane, that world felt too orderly, too perfect, almost dull. She found inspiration in women who stood apart from the norm, especially Katharine Hepburn, the embodiment of independence and grace, whom Diane deeply admired. She would often stand in front of the mirror, repeating Hepburn's lines, trying to capture that unique blend of strength and elegance. After graduating from high school, Diane attended Santa Ana College before moving to New York to study acting at the Neighborhood Playhouse, the prestigious school that had trained many renowned performers. Life in late 1960s New York was far from easy. She worked as a waitress, modeled, and even sang in bars to make ends meet. But it was in that city that Diane discovered a different world, one filled with art freedom and eccentric souls who made her feel truly herself. Her breakthrough came when she was cast in Woody Allen's Broadway play, Play It Again, Sam, a role that earned her a Tony Award nomination and began her fateful connection with the eccentric director. Allen once said, "She's unlike anyone I've ever met." Diane has this strange kind of light, innocent and wild all at once. From the stage, Diane stepped straight into the big screen, and just a year later, she astonished Hollywood with her portrayal of Kay Adams in The Godfather, 1972. The quiet yet deeply conflicted wife caught in the world of organized crime. That performance not only catapulted Diane Keaton to A-list stardom, but also laid the foundation for a dazzling film career that would span more than half a century. After the phenomenal success of The Godfather, Diane Keaton continued her collaboration with Woody Allen in a series of classic films Sleeper 1973, Love and Death 1975, and most notably Annie Hall 1977, the film that turned both of them into legends. The character of Annie Hall was, in essence, a reflection of Diane herself, spontaneous, contradictory, and irresistibly magnetic. Woody Allen once said, "I didn't write Annie Hall for Diane Keaton. I wrote Annie Hall because of Diane Keaton." And indeed, she breathed her very soul into every frame of the film. When it premiered her signature menswear style, the fedora hat, loose shirt, wide-leg trousers, and casually draped tie instantly became a global phenomenon, transforming Diane Keaton into a cultural icon of Hollywood. The Academy Award for Best Actress in 1978 was merely a confirmation of what everyone already knew. She didn't just play Annie Hall, she was Annie Hall. In the years that followed, Diane proved that her power didn't rely on timing or fame. In Warren Beatty's Reds, 1981, she transformed into journalist Louise Bryant, a performance that earned her another Oscar nomination, celebrated for its depth and emotional intensity. Then came Baby Boom, 1987, where Keaton once again won over mainstream audiences with her portrayal of a modern woman learning to balance career and personal life. A theme she consistently explored: the search for equilibrium between duty and freedom, between the longing to love and the fear of being bound. As the 1990s arrived, she appeared in Father of the Bride, 1991, a heartwarming family film that generations of viewers have rewatched during holidays. Her portrayal of a gentle, grounded mother bridging two generations made Diane more relatable than ever. And then, when many of her peers had stepped away from the spotlight, she reinvented herself once more in Something's Gotta Give, 2003, starring opposite Jack Nicholson. The late-in-life romance between two middle-aged souls was both humorous and deeply touching, helping the film gross over $266 million worldwide, and earning Diane yet another Oscar nomination, a testament to the fact that age could never diminish the allure of a soul that dares to live authentically. In her later years, Diane Keaton gradually withdrew from the limelight. She lived more privately, rarely appearing in public. But recently, her name resurfaced, not because of a role or an award, but because of a piece of news that left the entire world of cinema in stunned silence. Before dawn on October 11th, 2025, Hollywood was shaken by heartbreaking news. Diane Keaton, the symbol of individuality, the woman who had woven immortal performances in The Godfather, Annie Hall, and Something's Gotta Give, had passed away at the age of 79. Her representatives and family confirmed that she died in California, though the exact cause was not disclosed. That morning, emergency services responded to a person down call and arrived at Diane's Brentwood home at 8:08 a.m. She was transported in critical condition, but it remains unclear whether she drew her final breath at home or on the way to the hospital. Almost immediately, the media and fans around the world were consumed by questions. What illness had Diane been battling? Why had her health declined so suddenly? Yet the answers remained shrouded in silence. A family spokesperson asked for complete privacy and refused to reveal any further details about her medical condition or the circumstances of her final moments. However, accounts from her closest friends gradually began to form a faint picture of her final months. Carol Bayer Sager, Diane's longtime friend, recalled their last meeting just weeks before her death. Diane looked so thin, so fragile. She was still smiling, but there was something in that smile, as if she knew what was coming. A neighbor who lived near her Brentwood home said, "Lately I hardly saw her outside. Usually there was just a dim light glowing in the living room through the night, and sometimes I'd see her standing silently by the window, looking out at the garden." Another friend photographer, Ellen von Unworth, shared that in her final months, Diane seemed to retreat completely. She stopped giving interviews, stopped attending events, and spent her days at home, photographing flowers and rearranging her old pictures. She told me she wanted to make peace with time. Looking back, now that sentence feels haunting. And when the news of Diane Keaton's death broke, people began to realize perhaps her passing was not merely the loss of a Hollywood star, but the final chapter of a woman who had lived too long between the light and the shadows of her own soul. Just hours after the tragic news broke, Hollywood seemed to explode in shock. Social media was flooded with the words R.I.P. Diane Keaton, and those who had worked with her, actors, directors, designers alike, were left stunned, unable to believe what had happened. Brilliant, beautiful, extraordinary Diane Keaton has died, wrote Bette Midler, and within minutes the line was shared, millions of times, becoming a collective farewell from the entire world. An old friend from New York recalled through tears, "I can still hear her laughter echoing in that old acting studio on 52nd Street." Diane had a way of lighting up everything with just one sentence. Director Nancy Meyers, who worked closely with her on Something's Gotta Give, said through sobs, "I have never met anyone like her." Diane didn't just act. She lived, breathed, and felt everything more deeply than the rest of us. Amid that flood of tributes, Hollywood suddenly fell silent, as though the heart of the movie capital had lost not just a star, but a fragment of its very soul. Soon after Diane Keaton's death, the police swiftly launched an investigation. At first, they believed it was a natural death due to age, but the details uncovered inside her Brentwood mansion began to cast doubt on that assumption. Among the neatly organized folders and notebooks scattered across her desk, investigators found a series of handwritten notes about her health and state of mind in her final months' pages that revealed a quieter, more haunting truth. According to those writings, Diane Keaton had been struggling with several illnesses in silence. In one passage, she admitted to having battled bulimia, a psychological disorder born from Hollywood's relentless pressure on physical appearance, an obsession that had haunted her since youth. "I once lived by the spotlight, but I was also dying inside it," she wrote. The trembling lines stopped investigators in their tracks. They also discovered medical documents and old prescriptions relating to her history with skin cancer, a disease Diane had spoken about publicly in past interviews. Yet her private notes exposed fears far deeper than anyone had known. She was terrified of sunlight, of mirrors, of watching her skin change day by day. The illness had not only eroded her health, but seemed to gnaw at the spirit of a woman long admired for her strength and grace. As detectives pieced the clues together, a pattern began to emerge. Canceled appointments, unanswered calls, nights when the lights in her house stayed on until dawn. All signs pointed to a long decline, both physical and emotional, carefully hidden beneath her usual calm demeanor. Slowly, a portrait took shape. Behind the smile and poise was a woman quietly fighting a battle between light and darkness. Diane Keaton's death did not merely mark the end of a star's life. It exposed a deeper story, one of loneliness, exhaustion, and the invisible wounds that fame can leave behind. Perhaps that is why her decision to sell her Brentwood estate led many to believe she had been preparing for a farewell far more profound than anyone imagined. Earlier, in March 2025, Diane had suddenly listed her Brentwood home for sale, the house she had once called a living work of art. According to People, the mansion was valued between $20 and $30 million, and the news immediately stunned the public. Friends revealed that by that time, Diane's health had already begun to decline, though she continued her daily routines and maintained a strangely serene appearance. What shocked many even more was the fact that Diane had long declared Brentwood would be the last home of her life, the place where she wanted to grow old, under California's golden sunlight, surrounded by the red brick walls she had handpicked herself. In her book, The House That Pinterest Built, Diane vividly described how she had transformed the house into a reflection of her soul. "I can't imagine leaving this house for even a single day," she once said. And so, when the decision to sell it was made public, people mourned not just a home, but the closing chapter of Diane Keaton's story, that of a woman who spent her life searching for beauty, and in the end chose to let go of the very thing she loved most. To understand why that decision moved the public so deeply, one must return to the very place Diane once called the heart of my being, her Brentwood mansion. She purchased the home in 2009 for around $4.7 million and spent years restoring every detail, from the terracotta roof tiles and hand-carved oak doors to the antique chandeliers she patiently hunted down in European flea markets. The house was not merely a place to live. It was an extension of Diane's soul, a space that preserved her love for architecture, her childhood memories, and the timeless beauty slowly fading from modern Hollywood. Passing through the ivy-covered iron gates felt like stepping into a slow-motion film. The living room was laid with aged oak floors, its high ceilings exposing rough-hewn beams bathed in a warm glow from soft European brass lamps. At the center stood a red brick fireplace, the heart of the house, where she often sat reading scripts or sipping wine on pale autumn afternoons. Every room carried her personal imprint. White walls adorned with black and white photographs of rooftops and old doorways, a walnut dining table surrounded by linen-covered chairs, and a Gothic chandelier casting a tender light that seemed to breathe. Even the simplest objects, a worn wicker chair, a faded Persian rug, were kept by Diane as the scratches of time. After retreating from Hollywood's spotlight, she nearly vanished from the world that once adored her. Brentwood was no longer a showcase, but a sanctuary, a sun-drenched refuge where Diane lived amid small rituals and near absolute silence. Each morning she brewed her own black coffee, opened the windows to let the wind drift through, and sat quietly watching the first sunlight touch the red brick walls. For Diane, that wasn't just the start of a day, it was a ritual of dialogue with time itself, something that slowly drained her strength, yet could never touch her soul. The few friends who still visited said the house seemed sealed within a beautiful sadness, so still one could hear the wind brushing through the old olive trees. On the dark wooden table were scattered scraps of paper lines, of reflection fragments, of old lyrics, or simple reminders like, "Don't forget to water the flowers tomorrow." They said that in her final years, Diane lived among notes and photographs, quietly capturing each patch of light and shadow, as if trying to hold on to something slowly disappearing. When night fell, Brentwood glowed with a melancholy amber light, spilling through its glass windows. Diane would play old jazz records, pour herself a glass of red wine, and sit for hours at the long wooden table. No one knew whether she was reminiscing or simply listening to the silence. Some nights, neighbors saw her standing by the upstairs window, her thin figure draped in a white dress, wearing her familiar black fedora, gently raising her glass as if to touch the moonlight. That image, fragile yet haunting, made many believe Diane Keaton had chosen a different kind of existence. No noise, no farewell, only a quiet, dissolving into the final light of her own life. Amid that quiet, secluded life, there was still one thing that reminded everyone. A trace of Hollywood glamour lingered within Diane Keaton, hidden neatly in the garage at the foot of the hill, where she kept a collection of cars that perfectly reflected the essence of a true screen icon. The vehicle most closely associated with Diane Keaton was her Mercedes-Benz G-Class, the rugged, boxy SUV she often drove around Brentwood or along the scenic Pacific Coast Highway. It wasn't a flashy, show-off kind of car, but an older metallic black G-Wagon model with its original interior preserved almost entirely intact. A neighbor recalled that it was rare to see anyone else driving it. Diane preferred to take the wheel herself, even if it was just for a short trip to buy flowers at the Santa Monica Farmers Market. For her, the feeling of holding the steering wheel brought a sense of freedom no spotlight could ever replace. Alongside that, she owned another Mercedes G-Class, a premium ivory white edition that she bought for herself as a gift after the success of Something's Gotta Give. 2003. She once said she chose the lighter color because it doesn't take itself too seriously, and that every time she saw it parked in the driveway, she felt as though she were about to embark on a new adventure. The car, valued at about $130,000, was meticulously maintained and nearly spotless. Inside, there was just one ornament, a miniature fedora, a small, whimsical reminder of herself. In addition to the two Mercedes, Diane also owned a BMW 3 Series, the most modest and unassuming car in her collection, which she used on days when she didn't want to attract attention. She once joked that it was her paparazzi escape car, yet it also made her feel ordinary, like a mother, a neighbor, a middle-aged woman out for weekend errands. The BMW, priced at around $50,000, wasn't extravagant by celebrity standards, but it perfectly reflected Keaton's spirit, valuing practicality over opulence. Interestingly, unlike many Hollywood stars who hired staff to manage their garages and maintain their cars, Diane took care of everything herself. She enjoyed wiping the mirrors, refilling washer fluid, and regularly taking her cars to a trusted mechanic in West Los Angeles. One mechanic even remarked that she knew exactly which sound was normal and which wasn't. To Diane, cars weren't merely machines. They were companions, much like her home or her old camera. Silent objects that carried fragments of her soul. Diane Keaton was not only one of Hollywood's most respected actresses, she was also an enigma, balancing art and enterprise with rare grace. For over half a century, she lived as if writing her own script, dazzling before the camera by day, quietly transforming her passions into assets by night. Between fame and reality, Diane built her wealth not just through cinema, but through the sharp vision of a woman who truly understood her own worth. As of 2024, Diane Keaton's net worth was estimated at around $100 million, a figure born not of luck, but of decades of relentless work and an extraordinary sense of financial discipline, remarkable for an artist of her kind. The first building blocks of Diane Keaton's fortune appeared much earlier than most people realize. In The Godfather 1972, her role as Kay Adams earned her around $35,000, a considerable sum at the time. Just 2 years later, when The Godfather Part 2 was released, her salary had risen to $1.5 million, reflecting not only her fame, but also her rising stature as one of the most sought-after actresses in Hollywood. Annie Hall, 1970, brought her an Academy Award and elevated her to an entirely new level of recognition. From the 1980s onward, Diane became a bona fide A-list star, commanding between $2 and $5 million per film, an impressive figure for a woman in an era when Hollywood still favored men. Yet, unlike many of her contemporaries, Diane refused to be swept up in the excesses of celebrity life. She never bought yachts, never threw lavish parties, never changed cars with the trends. Instead, she chose to invest in real estate, a field her father had once worked in as a broker, and one she regarded as her inherited craft. Over 3 decades, Diane purchased, restored, and resold more than 15 historic homes across California, most of them in Los Angeles, Pasadena, and Beverly Hills. For her, each property was a living art project she personally oversaw. The design selected the materials and even chose every brick herself. One of her most notable ventures was her Los Feliz residence, where she bought an old Spanish-style villa, spent 3 years renovating it, and later sold it for twice the purchase price. The house was featured in Architectural Digest, which described it as a marriage of old-world Hollywood and contemporary minimalism. When asked why she always chose red brick, Diane simply smiled and said, "Because brick is never perfect. It breathes, it ages, and it's like me." Her ventures did not stop with real estate. Diane also expanded into other creative arenas. She published 2 memoirs and several photography collections, the most acclaimed of which was Then Again, 2011, a poignant exploration of her relationship with her late mother. The book quickly became a New York Times bestseller and was praised as a loving portrait of memory, creativity, and aging. She later released Let's Just Say It Wasn't Pretty 2014, a witty yet introspective reflection on beauty time and womanhood, written in her signature tone, part self-deprecating humor, part quiet wisdom. Diane also collaborated with major global brands such as L'Oreal and Chanel, serving as an ambassador for the Age Perfect campaign aimed at women over 60. When asked why she agreed to the role, she replied, "I'm not advertising a brand. I'm advertising age." That single statement perfectly captured her philosophy. Her worth was never defined by youth, but by the enduring courage to live authentically. In 2016, Diane surprised fans by introducing a product called the Keaton, her own line of California wine. The idea was born from her nightly ritual of enjoying a glass of wine at the end of the day. But unlike many celebrities who merely lend their names to a label, Diane was involved in every step of the process, from selecting the grapes and crafting the blend to designing the bottle. Her goal wasn't profit. It was, as she put it, to share the feeling of peace that comes with a quiet afternoon. The wine line was warmly received and went on to become a small but steady brand, expanding what many called the creative universe of Keaton. Still, her frequent buying and selling of homes led the media to dub her the most unpredictable investor in Hollywood. Publications such as Variety and The Hollywood Reporter even questioned, "Is Diane Keaton addicted to restoring old houses?" She responded with her familiar smile, "Maybe I'm just addicted to making old things beautiful homes, movies, or maybe even myself." If Diane Keaton's wealth reflected her intelligence and independence, her philanthropy revealed another side of her, a compassionate heart and an unshakable belief in kindness. Long before the name Diane Keaton became synonymous with Hollywood greatness, she had quietly devoted herself to charitable causes, not through grand gestures or public campaigns, but through consistent heartfelt action. Few people knew that her empathy was born from personal pain. Her father, John Keaton, suffered from Alzheimer's in his final years, a disease that robbed him of even the memory of his daughter's name. That quiet heartbreak changed her forever. Diane became one of the most passionate advocates for the Alzheimer's Association in the United States, contributing not just money, but her voice, her image, and her conviction. She once called Alzheimer's the cruelest form of human loneliness, a sentence that moved an entire nation. Alongside her work in film and charity, Diane was also a fierce guardian of architectural memory. With a passion for architecture, rare among artists, she spent years collaborating with the Los Angeles Conservancy, an organization dedicated to preserving the city's historic landmarks. Diane personally funded the restoration of an old theater in downtown LA and helped protect numerous 20th century structures from demolition amid the city's modernization boom. A city that loses its memory, loses its soul, she said during a 2017 fundraising gala, a quote later engraved in several tributes after her death. Her contributions reached far beyond that. She supported cancer research, children's diabetes foundations, educational programs for underprivileged youth, and women's rights initiatives. She never called herself an activist, but always acted on instinct. "If I feel something needs to be done, I do it," she told the Los Angeles Times. "I don't have a plan for charity. I just want the world my children grow up in to be a little kinder than the one I knew." In 2022, Diane received the prestigious Brass Ring Award, honoring individuals who dedicate their lives to public health causes. On stage that night, she didn't speak about herself. Instead, she told a story about an 8-year-old boy with leukemia she had once met. He was smiling and asked me, "Are you still making movies, Miss Keaton?" And in that moment, she realized that joy isn't about living longer. It's about making someone believe life is still beautiful. Even as her health declined, she quietly continued her philanthropic work. After her passing, several organizations revealed they had long been receiving regular donations from a friend named Diane. No notes, no publicity, just pure, wordless kindness. It could be said that if cinema allowed Diane Keaton to portray the beauty of strong and solitary women, then her quiet acts of kindness revealed something even deeper, a heart capable of loving without the need for an audience. And among the countless honors she received, the Oscar, the Golden Globe, the Lifetime Achievement Awards. Perhaps the most meaningful title was also the simplest: Diane Keaton, the woman who replanted compassion in a world that had forgotten how to listen. Yet behind all the brilliance, fame, and million-dollar ventures, Diane Keaton's private life told a different story. Throughout her career, she crossed paths with 3 of the most powerful men in Hollywood: Woody Allen, Warren Beatty, and Al Pacino. Each of them represented a distinct chapter in her life, radiant, passionate, yet tinged with solitude. With Woody Allen, everything began on the stage of Play It Again, Sam, where 2 eccentric souls found each other. Allen, intellectual, neurotic, and full of contradictions, was mesmerized by Diane's unpredictable spontaneity. Their romance was brief, but their artistic and intellectual bond endured for decades. Later, when Allen was accused in the controversy involving his adopted daughter Dylan Farrow, Diane was the only one brave enough to stand publicly by his side. "I believe in what I have always known." About my friend, she said, a seemingly simple statement that ignited a storm across Hollywood. Amid the height of the Me Too movement, her gesture turned Diane from a feminist icon into the target of backlash. The media attacked her colleagues, remained silent, and the public was divided. The woman once celebrated as the embodiment of independence and strength was now branded a traitor to her gender. It wasn't merely a blow to her reputation. It was a fracture in the moral image she had spent half a century building. For many, it was a bitter paradox. Diane Keaton, the woman who had spent her life proving that women could stand tall without relying on men, ultimately chose to defend a man accused of hurting women. From that moment on, in a Hollywood loud with judgment, Diane became silent, an icon trapped between loyalty and the awakening of a new era. Warren Beatty was another chapter, fiery, intense, but fleeting, like a role that ends too soon. They met while filming Reds, 1981, when both were at the peak of their careers. Beatty, the most charming man in Hollywood, was captivated by Diane's quiet intelligence and understated beauty. She, in turn, was drawn to his magnetic brilliance, the kind too powerful to ever possess. "Warren is smart to the point of being terrifying," Diane once said. "I loved him, but I couldn't live in his world." When the film wrapped, they parted quietly, as if both understood that a love so passionate could only exist on screen. With Al Pacino, the story was different, more genuine, more soulful. They met on The Godfather, loved each other in silence for nearly a decade, and parted just as quietly. Diane saw in Pacino the same wildness, sensitivity, and alienation that existed within herself. Years later, when she spoke of him, she still smiled and said softly, "He made me realize that love doesn't have to last forever to be real." Though she had loved deeply, Diane Keaton never married. When asked if she ever regretted it, she simply smiled and said, "Not at all. I love, but I also need to be alone." To her, marriage was too narrow a frame for a soul that longed for freedom. Yet Diane Keaton's life was not written solely in films or love stories. At the age of 50, when many believed she would spend her life in chosen solitude, she stunned Hollywood by deciding to become a mother, adopting a baby girl named Dexter, and a few years later, a boy named Duke. The decision came quietly, without fanfare or publicity, but it opened an entirely new chapter in her life. From the moment she became a mother, Diane seemed transformed. She stopped chasing perfection, stopped being so hard on herself, and began to savor life's small pleasures: a homemade breakfast, her children's laughter echoing through the yard, or an evening of piano music drifting through her peaceful Brentwood home. One housekeeper recalled that no matter how busy she was, Diane never ate dinner alone. She always waited for her children to come home, even if the clock had crept past midnight. In later years, as her health began to wane, the children she had once held so close returned the care she had given them. They spent weekends together, sharing dinners, walking in the garden, and reminiscing about old memories as the sun faded softly over the red-tiled roof. A close family friend remembered Diane once telling her children, her voice calm and almost weightless, "If one day I go away, don't be sad. Just remember that I lived exactly the way I wanted." And perhaps that was the most beautiful farewell a mother, an artist, and a free spirit like Diane Keaton could ever leave behind. And that is the story of Diane Keaton, a woman who lived a life unbound by any script but her own heart. In a world of Hollywood illusions, she chose authenticity. In the face of fame, she chose peace. And amid all the light, she kept a quiet, mysterious darkness that was hers alone. If you'd like to discover more untold stories, hidden truths, and behind-the-scenes moments of Hollywood legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Because sometimes behind the spotlight lies a truth far more radiant than what's seen on screen.